It is the rarest photograph in the world.
A couple picked it up in 2010 from a box of old photos in a local secondhand store.
These were just two cardboard boxes about this long, like about that high.
The smell of old wood and rusty metal lingered in the air as Randy Garrow stepped into a dim little antique shop tucked away in a quiet corner of Fresno, California. It was the kind of place that seemed to guard forgotten stories, but most people never bothered to stop and look. Randy, though, loved places like this, packed with dusty trinkets, faded keepsakes, and relics that time had nearly left behind. He had wandered through countless shops like this over the years, guided by a collector's gut and a love for the unknown. For Randy, it wasn't about striking it rich or stumbling on something rare. It was about the chase itself, the surprise of finding what others had overlooked. Still, he didn't realize that this ordinary day was about to turn into something unforgettable. He moved slowly through the crowded aisles, scanning shelves without any real plan. That was always his way. He never went in knowing what he wanted. He waited for the right thing to catch his eye, something that just felt right. Trusting his instincts had never let him down before. The shop seemed endless, filled with every kind of object, yet nothing grabbed him, until he noticed a worn cardboard box sitting off in a corner. The box itself wasn't special, but inside it sat a neat stack of old tintype photographs. Randy had a soft spot for pictures like these. He loved the idea of peeking into another time, wondering about the lives behind the faces, what kind of work they did, the conversations they shared, the things that mattered to them. He started flipping through the stack when one photograph made him stop cold. He couldn't explain it, but something about this single image tugged at him. It was that quiet nudge in his gut, the same feeling that told him when he had found something worth keeping. The photo was a 4x5-inch black and white tintype showing a group gathered outside a weathered barn. Some appeared frozen mid-motion, holding what looked like croquet mallets. The whole scene felt odd, yet oddly charming. The figures were small, blurred by distance, but it looked as if many of them were staring straight into the camera. What was it about this moment that had convinced someone it was worth capturing? From the style of clothing, Randy guessed it dated back to the 1800s. Photography was still new back then, and he pictured the heavy camera gear it must have taken to get this one shot. His hands tingled with excitement as he studied the picture. One thing was certain, he wasn't walking out of that shop without it. The shop owner noticed Randy's interest and called out, "That box, every photo's $2. $2, that was it. Randy pulled the last of his cash from his wallet and bought the picture without a second thought. He didn't realize it yet, but he'd just picked up a piece of American history. That evening at home, Randy set the photo under his microscope. "Come take a look at this," he called to his wife, Linda. She leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the faint, ghost-like faces that had grabbed his attention. Together they studied the small crowd, trying to imagine who these people were, why they'd gathered by that barn, and what might have become of them. The figures seemed locked in time, suspenders hanging loose, wide hats shadowing cautious eyes, their postures casual but strangely tense. Most of them faced the camera, fully aware someone was there to capture this single moment. Like so many 19th century photos, it carried that eerie, haunting stillness. Then Randy suddenly froze. His hand, still on the focus knob, went still. He pulled back, his face tightening with disbelief. "What is it?" Linda asked quickly, her tone edged with concern. He frowned, hesitating as if the words might sound ridiculous once spoken. I thought I recognized someone, but that's impossible. There's no way." Linda tilted her head, half amused, half curious. "Recognize someone? Randy, this photo's over 100 years old. You didn't exactly grow up with these folks." He let out a dry laugh but couldn't look away. "I know it sounds crazy, but for a moment, I swear, it felt like I knew that face. The eyes, the stance. It hit me like a jolt." Linda gave a small eye roll, though it was more gentle than dismissive. She'd seen this before. Randy often got swept up by his finds, and she'd even nicknamed it his photo fever. Still, there was something in his voice this time that unsettled her. He wasn't exaggerating. He was shaken. Randy leaned back to the microscope and twisted the lens, zeroing in on the one figure that had rattled him so deeply. Slowly, the image sharpened. Every fold of fabric, every speck of dust, every etched line of expression standing out in sharp detail. And then he stopped breathing. His chest pounded as realization crashed into him. The room suddenly felt unreal, like he'd slipped into someone else's dream. He lifted his head toward Linda, his face pale, eyes wide with shock. She could see it. Whatever he'd just seen in that photo had hit him harder than anything before. "Linda, just look," Randy whispered, his voice shaky. "Do you realize who that is?" He slid the chair toward her, his hand trembling as he motioned for her to sit. Curiosity got the better of her, and she leaned into the microscope. Within seconds, a sharp gasp broke the quiet. Her hand flew to her mouth as she blinked, leaned back, then leaned in again, struggling to believe what her eyes showed her. "Oh my God," she breathed. "That's Billy the Kid," Randy said, his voice trembling with awe, as if saying it out loud would make it real. The room fell into silence. Only the old ceiling fan hummed softly above them. Yet there he was, in the middle of the group, plain as day, the infamous outlaw Henry McCarty, better known as Billy the Kid. His youthful, hardened face sat under the shadow of a tilted hat, a croquet mallet dangling loosely at his side, a faint smirk frozen as if he'd just cracked a joke. And around him, Randy was sure of it now, stood other familiar figures, the faces, the clothes, the scraps of memory from old archive photos, all aligned. These weren't random farmhands. They were the Lincoln County regulators, the Wild West posse whose names still echoed in history. It was almost too strange to process. Men remembered as violent gunfighters, caught here instead in a light-hearted game of croquet. The sharp contrast between their reputations and this playful snapshot made the photo feel all the more haunting. Randy leaned back, his pulse racing. "Linda, do you realize what this means? There's only one known photo of Billy the Kid. Until now." She nodded slowly, eyes still glued to the microscope. "That photo sold for millions, Randy. And this one, it's not just him. It's him with the regulators. It's a whole story. It's living history." "I know," he whispered, still struggling to wrap his mind around it. "I know." That night, sleep was impossible. Randy lay staring at the ceiling. The image burned into his mind. The stance, the eyes, the undeniable presence of the outlaw in that old tintype. Not once did he think of money or fame. The idea of wealth never even crossed his mind. For him, it wasn't about price tags. It was about history, raw, unfiltered, and suddenly alive in his hands. A lost moment pulled back into the light, discovered by pure chance in a dusty antique shop for just $2. But as morning light spilled through the window, wonder gave way to practicality. This had to be verified. He needed proof. By mid-morning, he'd filled a list: historians, professors, collectors, anyone tied to Old West history. He fired off emails, made call after call, attaching scanned copies of the photo and explaining with breathless urgency what he believed he'd uncovered. But instead of curiosity or excitement, Randy ran headfirst into rejection. Call after call ended the same way, with scoffs, quick dismissals, or the click of someone hanging up. Billy the Kid only has one known photo, experts told him flatly, taken in 1880 at Fort Sumner. If you think you found another, you're mistaken, or trying to run a scam. Randy tried explaining the context, the details, even the microscope work, but nobody wanted to hear it. Some accused him of forgery. Others insisted it was just a staged reproduction, a trick they said popped up in collectibles all the time. One historian even laughed outright, saying, "You're the 10th guy this year who thinks he's found Billy the Kid." It hit hard. The energy that had carried him through the night before drained from him. Linda watched the shift happen. Her husband slumped, eyes dull as if the air had been punched right out of him. "Maybe we just need a different angle," she said softly. "We don't need everyone to believe us right away. We just need one person willing to really look." Her words lit the spark again. Randy couldn't quit. The image still pulled at him, heavy with a truth he felt in his bones. It was too real, too detailed, too important to dismiss. So they dug deeper. If experts wouldn't trust their word, they'd build the proof themselves. They combed through old records, compared faces using early facial recognition tools, studied terrain against historic maps, and matched clothing to the era. They analyzed shadows for time of day, even researched antique croquet sets, clinging to the hope that one overlooked detail might turn the tide. And then came a breakthrough. Kagan Incorporated, a respected numismatics and Americana firm in San Francisco, responded. Unlike the others, they didn't slam the door shut. They agreed to take a look. For Randy and Linda, it was a sliver of hope. When they finally sat down with David McCarthy, Kagan's senior numismatist, the air was heavy with caution. McCarthy's reputation was built on strict standards, and he made it clear he wasn't easily swayed. "I'll be honest," he said, carefully lifting the photo with gloved hands. "An original Billy the Kid photo is the holy grail of Western Americana. You don't just stumble on one in a $2 box." Linda gave a small, steady smile. "Except that's exactly what happened," she said with quiet certainty. McCarthy chuckled, but a spark of curiosity flickered in his eyes. He placed the photo on a light table and began his work. What was meant to be a quick consultation stretched into hours. He measured, inspected the tintype medium, examined composition, and pressed Randy for any supporting history that could help date and place the image. Days passed. Then finally McCarthy said something few experts ever dared. "There's something about this photo that makes me pause. It doesn't immediately scream fake." With those words, Randy and Linda were pulled into a journey they never expected, one that would stretch out over the course of a year. McCarthy and his team launched a full-scale investigation, bringing in historians, photo experts, facial recognition analysts, and even forensic geographers. Every tiny detail was examined: the grain of the barn's wood, the stitching on the men's coats, even the way the sunlight cut shadows across the ground. From the start, Kagan's team wasn't out to prove Randy right. They set out to prove him wrong. But piece by piece, the photograph passed every test. The tintype itself was confirmed as authentic to the late 1870s. Digital overlays of Billy the Kid's only known photo were compared to Randy's find, checking jawline angles, ear shape, nose bridge, and the spacing of the eyes. The resemblance was undeniable. Then came the regulators, Billy's notorious posse. Their faces began to emerge from the background, one after another, and the strangest detail of all, the croquet mallets, wasn't a joke after all. They matched an entry from the diary of Sally Chisholm, a known associate of Billy, and astonishingly a woman who appeared in the photo herself. In her diary, Sally described a gathering at John Tunstall's ranch in the summer of 1878, where she, Billy, and the regulators played croquet. The scene lined up with Randy's photo perfectly, right down to the antique croquet set visible in the background. That meant Randy's photo wasn't just rare. It actually predated the only authenticated photo of Billy the Kid by 2 full years. Here, Billy was just 19 years old, already living the life of an outlaw. As McCarthy later said, why, simple resemblance is not enough in a case like this. We had to answer where, when, how, and why this photograph was taken. After more than a year of study, the evidence pointed to one conclusion: it's authentic. For Randy and Linda, the news wasn't just sweet, it was vindication. Their instincts, their persistence, and their belief in the photograph had all been right. What began as a quiet stroll through an antique shop had turned into one of the greatest historical finds of modern times. That $2 photo was now valued at $5 million. The story exploded into headlines when National Geographic picked it up, producing a 2-hour documentary called Billy the Kid, New Evidence, narrated by Kevin Costner. Viewers around the world watched as the photo was dissected, faces, clothing, croquet mallets and all, confirming its place in history. Eventually, a California auction house listed the opening bid at $5 million. But for Randy, it was never just about the money. "We could use a new truck," he laughed in an interview, "but honestly, we just want to keep searching for pieces of history. The thrill is in the hunt." So the next time you wander through a dusty antique shop, flipping through old photos or forgotten trinkets, remember this: history is always hiding in plain sight. Sometimes all it takes is $2 and a second look. What about you? What would you have done in Randy's shoes? Have you ever stumbled on a hidden treasure in an antique store? Share your story in the comments. And if you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next discovery. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.